Joel, Karmela, welcome to Multispective. I am so excited to have you guys on air with me.
Thank you for inviting us. And you got a little taste of it off camera, behind the scenes. I apologize in advance for what could be a train wreck ahead. This is my beautiful mother, but we have a tendency to argue.
You guys are a dynamic duo. I think I can see why your podcast is blown up. It's like, it's just the relationship between you guys, a dynamic. I mean, the bickering, it's funny. It's like fun to listen to.
It is if you're not her son. But I'm her son, and it's not always that fun. So my mom, I call her Karm, I call her Mom, I call her whatever, but it's Karmela is her full name with a K, one L. But she's known affectionately on the podcast as Karm. The podcast is called Surviving the Survivor, and my mother is a child Holocaust survivor, and that's how we came up. So the name was actually sort of tongue-in-cheek, but ironically, we do a live daily true crime show on YouTube and everywhere you listen to podcasts. It's every single day, 5 or 7 p.m. Eastern time in America, and we talk about the most topical cases going on around the world, primarily here in the States. But so it started as just my mom and I talking to random people, and no one cared, and that reflected in our numbers. And then suddenly we got turned on to a very big true crime story here in South Florida, and then one thing led to another, and in about 2 years we've got 133,000 subscribers, and we're getting about 2 million plus views or listens a month. So we've gotten really good. And by the way, I'm the interviewer, and we've always got 3 panelists on every show.
That's amazing. I mean, in 2 years,
and the slogan is that we have the best guests
in true crime.
In true crime, best guests.
Right.
But everyone was very interested in that story, and since then we've done a gazillion other big ones.
Wow. Have you guys ever felt like your life's in danger talking about these kind of stories, being sometimes in the absolute hub of it all, that you could be a target?
Karm? No one would hurt innocent Karm.
No, I am paranoid, but even I don't worry about it, because during all the political tensions, which there were, between the Democrats and the Republicans before the election, and so we are totally out of politics. And well, I tend to be pretty diplomatic, and I don't go into extremes.
I love that you guys sort of like pivoted a little bit, and it sort of like really worked for you. I know that, Joel, you've worked in Fox before. So do you feel like bringing in some of those skills from your previous job and in everything that you do, I mean, that you've learned how to be like a presenter, how to do interviews, you feel like that comes naturally for you? What are the skills that you've picked up in that?
To a degree, yeah. I think everything, I say this frequently, everything I've done in life is a complete accident. Never really thought I was going to be a journalist. I found out about this thing called the NBC Page program, which is very well known in the States, where it's basically you do like little assignments at NBC News, and one thing led to another. And I was one of the first producer hires at MSNBC News, and then I ended my career 27 years later as a correspondent for Fox News out of Washington, D.C. So the most important thing in life is listening, because that makes you the best possible interviewer. So you're taking everything in, just a very good life skill. And I definitely learned stuff, and the advantage on YouTube, I think, and there's a lot of, there's actual technique. Like, you've got to come to a show with a bit of a rundown, a bit of an idea which way you're going to take it, follow-up questions potentially, all these sorts of things. And I take it seriously, and I'm very well prepared, even though people in the audience don't always agree. And that's it. So yeah, I think the short answer is yes. In my opinion, the future is what you're doing, Jenica, and what I'm doing, which is this traditional media. No, at least here in the States. I mean, no one really listens, watches anymore. CNN, MSNBC, they have their all-time lowest ratings right now. The wave of the future is Jenica and Multispective. That is the future.
Karmela, what about you? What are your thoughts on this? Do you agree with it?
As I said before, I went to the University of Geneva in Switzerland, and I have a bachelor's degree in political science. Before that, I lived in Yugoslavia, which at that time was a communist country. And before that, I had to survive during the Nazi era in Europe, I'm sure. So I am very experienced in not getting in trouble if possible. One of the funny little stories that I have to tell you is that once I love dogs, I don't like cats. And once I said
You
that.
just alienated half the audience just now.
Anyway, the point is that it became a controversial issue. What is this? You discriminate against cats? You have to really be careful what you say and how you say it in trouble. And you really have to be very diplomatic and careful not to walk on other people's toes.
Right. If we had communication the way we do today, if we had it back then, how different do you think the Holocaust would have been? Do you think it would have been as vast, as crazy as it actually was?
Considering how much hatred there is towards Jews today, I don't think it would be that different. I mean, it's a very
not pleased with what's going on around the world.
It's a very dark view of the way things are. You see, when the problem was that people were discriminating against people of color, then Jews were declared as the white men. You see the point? And then now, when it's okay to be of any color, now we are the colonists. There is no way for us to win. No way. I don't think it would. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking, oh, everything would be visible and explained and communication and transparent. And I think no. I think that prejudices are so ingrained and prejudgments and looking only at one side of the conflict or of the situation rather than on both sides and try to sort it out. I don't think that would change.
Yeah, do you reckon it's also because it's just people need someone to scapegoat? Like people need to hate on someone or something, and it's it's easy.
Even when I was still in college, I remember this as if it's still very fresh in my mind. In a sociology course, we learned how you have to have always an out group, an in group, and an out group. The group you will hate.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So we, religious people say we are the chosen people. Like obviously we are chosen for the wrong things, So, but in any case, but it's an interesting thing is that we don't hide who we are.
That's true.
We don't hide, and people are very loving and caring.
Karmela, I do want to go into your story a little bit because I think that's something that we need to talk about, and I think we are just having less and less and less people that are around to share this kind of story or even have the language, right? The English language to be able to share that story. So I know that I was searching for, Holocaust survivor stories for a while. It's I was very lucky to come into you guys. And so, yeah, I mean, why don't you start by telling our listeners a little bit about your story? Where does it all begin for you?
All right, how many? Because I learned to abridge and simplify to the point of where I can do the whole Holocaust in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes. No, but all kidding aside, how much time do I have to?
Oh, you've got all the time in the world. Okay.
What I was going to say is there's only, 𝗔𝗂𝗃, in the entire world, 265,000 Holocaust survivors left, and that number drops a lot every day. Half of those live in Israel. The rest are spread out across like 90 countries. So
Mm.
anyway, Carm, you are the star of the show.
By
I'll
the
lead her
way,
into this
this
because
is
otherwise she'll be.
a
Yeah.
statistic from last summer. 100% it changed. I personally know a few that died.
Oh,
If you ever get hold of that book,
Yeah.
Surviving the Survivor, it's on Amazon. The reason I say is because in the back of the book we have some pictures and also of the town where I was born. And Joel came last summer before the book was finished. He did an epilogue with his family, the grandkids, everybody. We went to this town. The
Mm.
town is called 𝗤𝗂𝗃𝗃. And you were in Hungary, so it's right on the border between Hungary and what is today Serbia. But in 1939, when I was born, it was Yugoslavia, and then Yugoslavia politically fell apart into 6 different states. I was born there in 39. My father was an optometrist, and he had his own eyeglass store,
Yeah.
and on the main street. This town had about 100,000 people, but had a very
this is the 27-hour version of the story. We're
Oh, no,
starting.
please.
We're
Lay it
starting
on
with
me.
this. We're starting with the
no.
street. The description of the
I
street.
have to set the stage for the. You have to
Set
get
the
an
st-
idea where we grew. It was a sleepy
Yeah.
with a 1 mile radius center, and 5,000 Jews in this town of 100,000, and we lived in the center. Most of the Jews lived in the center, and outside it was agricultural and different. There were different ethnicities in this town. Everything went well for my family, my father, mother, and my grandmother, grandfather, my father went to work. Then in 1942, the German Nazis were working with the Hungarian Nazis, and they took over this town and attached it to Hungary. This is the history of this town. Once it's attached to Serbia, once it's attached to Hungary. During the war, there was no bombardments or war. They just came in, marched in, and they said, this is now Hungary.
Right.
But nothing happened. And then a little bit later, they said all the Jews have to go into the ghetto. I don't know if you heard of the word ghetto. For example, in Venice, the word comes from Italy, from Venice, where the Jews had to live in a certain part of Venice. And it was, maybe it's an Italian word, it means something in Italian. They live in the ghetto. And
Okay.
so they put us all in the ghetto. But it was very close to the end of World War II, because World War II went from 1939 to 1945. And when we went to the ghetto, it was a little bit looser and less violent than other places, because they even let my father go out to his glass store, because the people needed eyeglasses. So they let him go into his eyeglass store. And then
At that
and
point, though, did you guys have any idea that there was something going on specifically towards like the Jews, or
I
was there any
spoke
rumor?
about this with my mother a lot, because I was only 4.5, very
Yeah.
precocious. I was with old people, very precocious. And anyway, my mother said they all were in major denial. In major denial. They heard rumors they couldn't believe. They could not believe. And especially my father, who before the Nazis really became the Nazis in Germany, my father spent 4 years studying optometry,
Optometry. Yeah.
and in Germany. And I have in the book, for some strange reason, his diploma survived. You know, I have a picture of his diploma in my book, in Joel's book.
Freudian slip.
I
By the
love
way,
it. In my
Karma's the
book,
only.
it's become my book now.
She's the only person in human history that didn't write or do anything yet signs every single book and every
I
book
signed
signing.
the book.
But this version of the story is pain. I'm gonna scoot us forward. So, long story short, her father did not believe this was going to happen. Her mother, these are my grandmother and grandfather, which is weird because this is one generation apart, right? And I feel like I'm so far removed from it. So my grandfather stays. One day the Nazis come, they grab him. My mother and grandmother run out the back door. There was a hole in the fence. They take off. And my
No,
grandmother,
you are killing the story.
oh,
I have
God.
to say this one part. My father couldn't believe that the Germans would do what people were making, you know, concentration camps and gas.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
father couldn't believe this because he lived there and he said, I know the Germans, they were a civilized people. My mother wanted to go to the big city of Budapest. Were you in Budapest?
Yeah. That's where it
So
was.
that was a big city compared to my hometown. My mother wanted to go there and hide, and my father refused to because he said the Germans would have the worst case scenario they would make us work. Anyway, now I'm going to accelerate it. They came to take us to the freight trains to take us to the concentration camp on June 18th. And my father, in that moment, when they came very early in the morning, they were Hungarian Nazis, and they came in and they said, "We want you to put all your money and all your jewelry on the table. We want you to make a little suitcase for yourself. You are leaving." At that moment, my father got scared and he said to my mother, do something, Vera." Vera was her name. And my mother took my hand, and there was a little gate in the back of it. The houses had little gardens next to them, very small houses with gardens, and she walked me out of the ghetto while the soldiers were collecting next door, and took me. I won't go into details what happened, where we went. We ended up at an eye doctor, a Christian eye doctor's house, who my father had a business connection with him because they referred to it. And he told my father prior to that he would help us in any way he
How's you
could.
guys? Yeah.
And even though he knew that he would be hung or shot or sent to a concentration camp, he opened the door and let us in.
Wow. And that was a
And
guy that basically saved you guys in a sense, like by
yeah, he was
protecting you
one
guys.
of the two major people who saved me, because my mother it was a small center of town, and my mother was a blonde, natural blonde, not like I, but she was a natural blonde, and people in town knew her. She happened to be pretty, like with a doll face, pretty woman. And people knew her, and she was young, and she was horrified that she would be recognized. And so the doctor Scherzer, he was a benefactor of some nuns, and he said he will ask these nuns if they will take me and let my mother know. He went over to, there were no phones, so he went over to the nuns and told the truth to the nun superior. And the nun superior said, even though she knew the danger, she knew that she would be in major, if not killed, very close to it. And she said she would take me, but I have to come over at night. So my mother and Dr. Scherzer walked me over there. They left me there, and my mother took a train up to Budapest, which is only a 2.5 hour train trip, and left me with these nuns who were very nice to me. And it was almost the end of the war already in some parts of Europe, like in Italy. And anyway, I was with these nuns for about 6 months. And my mother started to really worry about me and miss me very badly. And she bribed the railroad worker who was related to the assistant of my father in the train, in the store, who lived in Budapest, worked for the railroads. And this guy brought me up to Budapest after all these months.
Wow.
And when I arrived, it's an irony of life. You can Google it. As I was arriving there, at the same week, maybe, if you Google the siege of Budapest during World War II, the Soviet Union, ally of the United States, they were trying to get the Nazis out, the Germans and the Hungarian Nazis out of Budapest. And they started very bad bombardments. And they lasted about 49 days, these bombardments. And we had to sleep in the basement and so on and so forth. And there was no food, and it was not a happy time.
Yeah,
And
let me fill in a couple of the gaps. So her father, again, he didn't think this could happen. My grandfather, so he stays. He gets taken to Auschwitz, obviously the most notorious concentration camp, and he had studied his degree, as my mom said, in Germany. So he was an optometrist. He thought it'd be a good idea to tell the
he
Nazis
spoke the
forming.
language.
Yeah,
Right.
he said, "Look, I studied how to, build or create or make lenses and glasses." And right away, they put him in the death line and made who was with him.
My mother's father. My
Oh,
mother's
great.
father,
So
he
so they
saw him
Great grand.
immediately,
standing because they didn't know which lane goes where, and he stepped over from the other lane and went with my father into the gas chamber.
yeah. So
And
he
there
was.
were these witnesses from *𝗂𝗂𝗃𝗃 who told my mother in the end of the war.
Yeah, by the way, they're Sunday morning in Shanghai. Everyone's loving this story. But as depressing as it is. Then the other thing is, like my grandmother had like this crazy inner strength because she was not always like this later in life, but she protected her and to when they were in Budapest, my mom would purposely say she was converted in this Catholic school, so she would purposely say like the Our Father and these other prayers, so no one would like
What happened? It was
so
a
they
big.
wouldn't know that they were Jewish, basically. And the thing that I was going to say is there was no food. So during the bombardments, horses would keel over, get killed, and they would have to run out and chop off some meat off of a leg of a horse, and that's how they survived. So some crazy stories.
Right.
Carm has
Because it
seen a
was
lot.
still winter, it was March and February, March, and it was still snowing, and it was still like the horses were refrigerated. You know what I mean?
Right. Preserved.
Every animal person hates that
Wow.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was some of
Bad
the?
joke.
I know I love these dark jokes, so I like that you're bringing humor into this as well. It just makes it a little bit lighter to listen to something so heavy like this.
Yeah.
But what were some of the things that you saw during that time yourself? Was there anything that you will forever sort of carry with you?
Well, one of the things that I remember, there were snipers and there was artillery and there were bombardments. So
Right.
at night, it was a big apartment building, long, but it wasn't very high, but it was like not six, 5-story high, but all the people were permitted to bring down a bed, all the tenants, one bed where 4 people could sleep on one single bed every night during the bombardments. And my mother was hiding in this apartment with my grandmother's sister and her cousin. And she was very, they were suspicious of her, the other tenants who always lived in this house. And it wasn't uncommon to betray and tell the police that they were Jewish. So my mother was very afraid of that. When I arrived, I knew exactly who I was. I was now 5.25 or 5.5. I was very precocious. So I knew I was Jewish, and I would kneel down next to my bed. There were all beds in this unfinished basement, one after the other. And at a very loud voice, I would say these Christian prayers every night so that nobody
Would suspect.
would suspect. And I was kind of the unsung heroine of the family for this. You know,
Right.
they mentioned it afterwards. But it went on for about 50 days. There were many dead people. And my mother was strange. She insisted on taking me with her during the time when she was looking for flour or looking for food, you know, going and trying to get some food, and she wouldn't leave me behind. And I remember snipers, like a couple was coming towards us on the bridge, and one of them dropped. You know,
It's the
the
first time I've
the
ever heard the story in my life right now.
yeah, this is a story that my mother repeated to me, so that my memory is, that's the reason I don't tell it often, because it's a kind of a foggy memory. But the weirdest thing is that these were people from my town that she recognized. And then she told me another horrendous story that stayed with me more than anything I experienced, that my mother, who was also a survivor, she said to me, she was going in, you remember the tramways in Budapest? And did you ever see those shoes on the
Oh,
shore
yes.
of?
Yes. Yeah.
So my mother told me this story that really made me sick. There was a group of people that they were leading towards the Danube to shoot them, the armed people.
Yeah.
And an athletic young man jumped up on a tramway as it was moving.
Wow.
But wait a minute. And my mother saw it with her own eyes. My mother wrote down all her experiences when she was 84-year-old. She dictated them and she wrote them down. And she saw them jump up in the tramway and being pushed off the tramway by the people in the tramway because they didn't want to help him.
My
Yeah.
gosh.
So my grandmother remarried, and my mother's father was named Ladislav. They call him 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗃. My grandmother remarried another guy with the same name, Ladislav. So he was also a 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃. My whole life, my mom spelled it Latzi. So when my middle daughter was born, I took the ZI, and my middle daughter's name is Zizi. And then my mom, my mom doesn't handle things like this well, so she laughed at the name and said that it was actually a 𝗚𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. So now I've misnamed my daughter according to my mom. And for some reason, my mom thinks it's funny that I did that, which isn't really that funny, Karm. So,
But I have to tell you something. I have to tell you, my stepfather's pregnant wife and son were gassed in Auschwitz.
it's another uplifting part of the story.
Well, she wanted to hear about it.
So,
She asked for it.
yeah.
Man, that's crazy though. Do you know of anyone actually that did survive the Auschwitz?
Yeah, many people survived at that moment because it was only like 3-4 months before liberation. The Hungarian
Right.
Jews, the Hungarian Jews were the last ones. I have here in the building where I live Polish, from origin Polish
Right.
Jews. They went through this hell for 4.5 years.
My mom has two friends. One is no longer with us, but they were both. One was a legal, huge lawyer in Israel. The other is a very well-known architect. And I interviewed these people all the way back in 1999 before I ever actually did anything by writing the book. But her friend Rita would hide. I think it was Rita. There was Brewery and Rita, but one of them would hide at night inside of a coffin. And it was crazy. Some of these stories that's where they would spend the night. Another one was like inside a pig carcass or something crazy. So the stories are just like unreal.
Well, I have a very good close friend who lives in New Jersey now, and she was hidden. She's my age, a year older, and she was hidden in a pigsty in Poland for 24 months. On the top of the pigs, there was a ladder, and they keep the hay. That's where her mother and her were hiding. And the righteous Gentile woman, a Christian woman, saved them.
My gosh.
Nobody who is alive could be saved without help. Nobody.
Carm, you've got 𝗔𝗯𝗂𝗃𝗁𝗂𝗁 speechless here. So
Yeah.
No. It's listen. It's like hard to believe the level of atrocity. Hard to believe.
Yeah.
It's hard to, I survived. And by the way, you don't have to buy the book. Our book is on Audible. If you go on Audible, it's Jules and my voice.
really, I've really elevated your life and your golden.
I
know. It's like a second.
You
It's
know,
like you basically
I don't know
started
how
with
to
her.
convey my appreciation, Joel. How can I express it better? Because
My-
you never, I don't think you hear me when I say I really appreciate it.
AC/DC has a song. It's called "Money Talks."
Oh, you want me to pay you?
Money talks.
Yeah.
Just pay me in money. Thank me in money.
Yeah.
But so, Karmela, I want to ask though, like, when was the last time that you've been back there to Hungary?
last
Germany?
summer with Joel.
Do you
so the
feel?
book, the book ends us going back with my kids. So it's like 4 generations of us there. We went and
Oh, wow.
found my grandfather. So my grandfather who was gassed in Auschwitz. There's obviously no physical remains, so they just wrote his name on my great grandfather's tombstone, which is in the middle of nowhere in Serbia, where I've never been. And so we went. It was amazing.
It's next to the town. It's next to the
it's next
town
to
where
us. It's a beautiful
even Joel
city.
was amazed how many, it was a Jewish cemetery, and there were a lot of dead people there. My father's parents had the good luck of dying before they were taken away from natural causes. So
Right.
so when my mother came back from hiding in Budapest in the end of the war, there was a little room in the bottom of my grandparents' tomb, and she put on my father's name and that he was killed in Auschwitz and that he lived 34 years. So the children, we have a picture in the book of that.
Did you find it quite triggering going back there?
Well, don't forget, I was away for about a few months, really, because most of the time I was at the nuns, but I never left the nunnery ever. And then when the war was over, I went right back to my hometown, and I have my high school diploma from my hometown. And I grew up with these people in my hometown, and I went to the 50th high school reunion one year, and I went a few more times, and I still have people I know, people who I'm friends with. I still have my stepfather's family. There are relatives there.
I mean, it sounds like you like picked up right where you kind of like left off. It was like your life was on pause for a while. It was a very traumatic pause, and then you kind of go right back into it and continue education and continue on with life. Except now you just have this deep deeply embedded memory of, something really hard that
And
happened.
yes and no, because it was a very heavy atmosphere. As I said, the town had 5,000 Jews before the war. I mean, maybe
Mm,
4,900. I mean, approximately 5,000.
yeah.
And when the war was over, there were 1,000 who survived. Period. 4,000 were killed, and there was unbelievable. These 1,000 who came back really got into mourning and crying and
Mm,
heavy atmosphere. And when there were Jewish holidays, they were in the synagogue. You just heard them weeping and crying, and it wasn't funny. But the local people who were not Jewish were also went through hell during the war. It was difficult. Many lost their fathers in the war.
mm,
Many had been displaced, had to
mm,
move from other places, and it was like there was a lot of shortages. Like you couldn't get a comb to comb your hair.
mm.
The
Right.
synagogue, by the way, is the second largest, I think, in Europe, and it's now a historic landmark. It's a beautiful, my whole. By the way, one of the reasons I think the book is important is not just my mom's story. It's also for me is just that everyone in their family, everyone's got a story, and it's worth like
Mm,
exploring your own family because you'll be
yeah.
amazed at the things that you find out
Mm,
about your own family that you just didn't know. But I knew bits and pieces of this story, and but then going to visit, I just always pictured it, I guess, because it's my American, superiority complex. I thought this was going to be like just a dump of an Eastern European town, and it's a little like that, but it's but it's actually really quaint and nice, and it's like cafes. It was nothing like what I expected. It was
mm,
really like interesting just to see it after all those
yeah.
years, and then see the spots where my mom was. Like again, it doesn't have to be our story, my mom and I, but um, anyone's story, like their whole family. Like I think you said
Yeah.
you're of Indian descent, so to go back to India and see where your relatives came from, you'll
Mm,
find things out that you've never known or never knew
right.
about prior. So that was another
Yeah.
interesting aspect. But I am psyched to hear that you can get into Amazon or Audible. The book is Surviving the Survivor, so please check it out.
Yar, for sure.
I think me. It's
She's gonna tell me
my
why I'm wrong.
life,
She's gonna tell
really
me why
my
I'm
life
wrong.
with all the
Yeah.
warts and all the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
During the writing of the book, my father, her husband of 63 years, we argue about who's more important, my father or her husband. But he
Mhm.
got really ill and he passes away. And, we don't have to get into all the details now, but my mom lost a child. So there's a lot of things that she's been through. And,
Right.
it's very inspirational. And now I'm
Mm.
actually planning to do it about my father was a psychiatrist, really smart guy with a really interesting take on life. And so the next book is
Mm.
Surviving the Psychiatrist. And trying to work on that right now. So
Wow.
it's been a journey, but a really interesting one.
Yeah, what is your podcast? What is your podcast?
You're on it, Carm. You're on
No,
it.
no, no, no. Wait a minute.
Yeah, it's similar. I
My
guess some people,
understanding was that
yeah,
you just like to hear people's because
stories.
everybody has a story. Everybody has
Yeah.
But you focus on trauma. Is that what you focus on?
Yeah, so they're like trauma stories or stories about people who've really gone through some kind of adversity. They can be like mental health related issues. They can be, a particular experience that was very traumatizing. We did custody battle stories as well. We've done stories of murder. They've done their jail time. They've come out and they've turned their lives around. I had a bank robber. He actually turned himself in, did time, and then, sort of, is now living a different kind of lifestyle. So really, it's just about, I would say, everyday heroes, in a sense, because every single person is going through something. They've all been through some kind of lifehood trauma experience, pain.
you.
It's all about the journey, I guess. Eh?
I totally agree with you that I have a master's degree in social work, so I was doing therapy with people
Right.
and
Yeah.
and somebody would come in and say to me, "Oh, you don't want to hear my story. My story is boring." And I said, "I never ever heard a boring story. Everybody has unbelievable stories just to get through life."
Say you have a therapy session, you've decided, to take on a client. You don't know very much about this client. This client comes in, and this person is an ex-Nazi. What would you want to say to him? What would you have to say to him?
Interesting. By the way, let me before you answer that, we did an episode before
Yeah,
with
he
True
can
Crime.
tell you this, what
We
happened.
invited on the grandson of a
You
Nazi.
invited on.
I did. Grandson of a Nazi and the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. We're going around the UK speaking at synagogues, and Karm is never one to mince words, and it didn't end very well for, believe it or not, the Holocaust survivor granddaughter. Karm
Daughter, the Holocaust survivor
had a
daughter.
daughter, and this Nazi was a grandson, but Karm
Yeah.
Karm made it a little uncomfortable for me and her, and why was that, Karm?
Why? Yeah.
They came in, and the survivors, they are from England, okay? Both of them. He left Germany and lives in England. And both of them, they are going around synagogues and giving little talks, and her main topic is that we have to be, what was the term she used? We have to be a little kinder. This is how she spoke.
Compassionate?
No, she was, we
No.
have to be a little kinder.
Okay.
We have to be a little sweeter. And then we will not have the Holocaust again.
Karm teed off on her and basically told her she
And
was.
and then she said, and when we go to the synagogues, all these survivors who are there, they get so loving, and they give us a hug, and they give us a kiss. And this was already at a time where Holocaust, where anti-Semitism was not going up like 100%; it was going up 400%. And I just got very furious, and I said, "Why would you go and preach to the choir? You try to convince the converted people already. They are already converted." What I said to this, I said, "Why don't you work on the other, recruit other Germans to go out and educate people about what's happening and what happened, instead of going and talking in synagogues, and
Yeah.
just so you would feel
I'm
better, so
I'm
that you would."
laughing because I think she was a therapist also, if I remember, and she was telling you in the interview, Karm, that you have like anger issues or things that you haven't dealt with. She was telling
Resolved.
she was like trying to say it in a nice way. And my mom is like, especially as my mom gets older, she's more and more unfiltered, and she was just destroying this woman, and it was a little
No, it
off
was.
the.
I tell you, if an ex-Nazi would come and he would say to me, "I spent the rest of my life since the war trying to repent and trying to help people, and I was in Africa building, digging wells, and I was doing this and I was doing that, and he really repented for the thing." I would not be so judgmental as not to understand and forgive the person. But if they came back and said, "You deserved it," I wouldn't be happy. So
By the way, I know people
repent.
are I know people are listening right now, but Carm just leaned in, so it's kind of a running joke. I have an Instagram account, Surviving Survivor 2, and so anytime we are FaceTiming, Carm and I here, she's never in frame. Like I'm looking at the top of her ceiling or
I
the
love
foot
it.
No,
or her foot,
I tell you
and
what,
so I always
here
post
is
those
what
on
much
I did.
Instagram. I
Here
always
is
post
what
those on
I did.
Instagram, and everyone knows what it is. Like everyone knows that it's me
Yeah.
FaceTiming with Carm. No, it
But
was neither here nor
may
there.
I say something?
FaceTime with her
By the way,
children.
I gotta beg Carm to do these appearances. But we went on a whole book tour here in the United States. We went to, Philly, Boston, New York. We went up to Toronto. We've done Tampa, Florida, this, that, and the other thing. Every single time, Carm's like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it, Joel. I'm retired. And then she comes on like this show and she doesn't stop talking. You really hate it that much, Carm, right?
Anyway.
Well, maybe it's just this podcast and me, and we're just bringing out something really.
Yeah. That's what it is.
Conversation.
That's what it is.
Final thoughts, final plugins before we end this episode.
Carm, I'll let you have the final word because you're the matriarch of the show. My final word is thank you so much, Jenica, for having us on. By the way, Carm's final word, we're gonna have to cap at like 17 minutes, but my final word is thank you so much. I hope to get to visit Shanghai and Asia in the very near future. And the podcast is a true crime podcast. We really do have the best guests in all of true crime. We have criminal profilers, retired detectives, FBI agents. I've become friends with children of serial killers through this,
and one more thing is that important thing is that we are also trying to support the victims.
Yeah, we're very victim oriented. And so it's found the main platform is on YouTube, but we're growing. We're everywhere you listen to podcasts.
And it's
Spotify.
called Surviving the Survivor.
Surviving the Survivor.
And
the
we
book.
Wish you luck.
And the book, Carm, is available anywhere books are sold. And it is my mom's story about being a child Holocaust survivor. But more importantly, it is life advice. And it is an actual brutal conversation, one of many that Carm and I had that we recorded. And you will, if anything, you will learn new curse words in English from my beloved mother.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Having us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed the episode and would like to help support the show, please follow and subscribe. You can rate and review your feedback on any of our platforms listed in the description. I'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and open to share their life experiences with us. Thank you for showing us we're human. Also, a thank you to our team who worked so hard behind the scenes to make it happen.
𝗠𝗂𝗹𝘁𝗁𝗂𝗲,
Stefan Menzel.
The show would be nothing without you. I'm Jenica, host and writer of the show, and you're listening to Multispective.